Hey guys, I'm really excited because I have a really special guest on today. So we have Creationist Cat, who's really Vadim Newquist. How's it going, man?
Well, that is a running conspiracy theory that we are indeed one and the same. But yeah, it's going pretty well. How are you, man?
I'm doing well also. So, for the
Sweet.
viewers who don't really know about Creationist Cat or don't know about him, could you kind of tell us a little bit about him?
Sure, sure. I'm going to explain it, but inevitably, if you have not visited the Creationist Cat channel, there's probably going to be a certain amount of what the fuck for listeners who are not aware of the channel. Uh, Creationist Cat is a cat who was zapped by God through the internet.
Hmm.
He is, he is a super intelligent talking cat who mostly talks about politics, religion, hot button issues. Every now and then kind of gets a little bit into pop culture. We've done everything from interview people like Max Landis and Kelly Jones, the ex-wife of Alex Jones, to discuss, like, I don't know, just the rise of evangelicalism in the Republican Party, and certain issues like I don't know, Holocaust denial and 9/11 conspiracies and stuff. It's a fun channel. It's Some people think of it as being comedic. I think that's an apt way to describe it. But yeah, just check it out. I think it's something that more needs to be experienced than explained. So hopefully there will be a link down below in the Christ
Yes,
box.
there will be. Okay, so to kind of start out, you are someone who you could consider sort of like an OG or like definitely someone who's been in the skeptic community for a long time. I just kind of was wondering your sort of summary or your viewpoint on sort of the evolution, the starting and then the evolution of the skeptic community as it went on, and then obviously what it exists as today.
Yeah, sure. I hope you don't mind if before I launch into that, I kind of like start out with a couple of quick anecdotes about like my childhood that I think are kind of informative as the type of person I am. I mean, it kind of has to
Sure, go
do
ahead.
with, yeah, yeah. And you know what? I'm sorry to do this, but I'm really gonna have to stand up for a second and kick this cat out of this room because he
That's
is
fine.
just going to cause all sorts of problems. Cortez, I love you, but God, you can't wag your tail like that, dude. All right. So, as I was about to say, okay, so these are just two, I think, kind of interesting little anecdotes from my youth that I think really define me when it comes to my attitude towards both religion and bullshit in general.
Hmm.
They were really kind of defining moments for me. The first is my mom had this library of books when I was a child, and she had this one book that was written by a friend of hers, and this woman was really quite beautiful. I mean, especially to like a kid, she had very like kind of like princess like features, and I remember picking up this book. And this is probably I was around like 5 to 7 years old. I was right around the age where you could successfully like read the back sleeve of a book and like understand it, you know? So
Yeah.
anyway, so I pick up this book and I go, "Oh my God, who is this woman? She's so beautiful, Mom." And she says, "Oh, that's a friend of mine. Like she wrote that book. Take a look at it." So I read like the about this book a portion of the sleep, and it was nuts. So it was like kind of mixing like all this new agey like like we will meet in the astral plane with all this Jesus-y stuff
Wow.
and talking about like heaven and hell and and there's all this craziness and I just like read through it and I this is not like me. I was not like some little shit who would do things like this all the time. But I threw the book across the room and I said, "This is bullshit."
Really?
And yeah, yeah. Fortunately, my mom thought that was really funny and charming. Certain parents would have a big problem with that. But I think I just had this sort of like innate kind of response, to just what I had read. It was just so I don't know, just it was bullshit, and it angered me, just the level of bullshittery that she had crammed into that book. So that's the first little anecdote. The second is when I was a child, I remember I used to go to this sleepaway camp in France, and they would have Catholic Mass every Sunday, and you had to attend. It was insanely boring. The dude was speaking in French, so I didn't understand what the fuck he was talking about. This is French Canada that I happened to go there for, and my friends and I would basically sit in the back. This was on like a tennis court, and we would basically just we would spend the time more or less just decapitating ants. And I mean, it's horrible, but that's my memory of what we would do. Kids do horrible things like that. I regret it. But anyway, it was boring as hell. And I remember thinking to myself, having this thought, like, there's no way that this could be an accurate reflection of what, God is like. Because if this was really, kind of something that God inspired, and something really having to do with God, it wouldn't be this boring, and and then I also recall kind of being force-fed those communion wafers, and I asked someone, what the fuck is this? And I was told it was the body of Christ, and I was young enough for where I was like briefly freaked out that I had eaten actual human flesh, and then I realized, okay, it's supposed to be symbolic. All right, fine. But the big tell for me with all of this was the day that I saw the priest, or whatever the hell he was, ride into camp before the Mass took place. This guy would put on this like stupid Pope hat, and had this like, basically like this goofy Pope garb on. But I saw this guy ride in on a motorcycle full of tattoos, wearing an AC/DC Highway to Hell shirt, okay? And I just, immediately snapped in my head, okay, this guy is, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but this guy doesn't legit believe in Jesus. This is a job for him. Mm-hmm. And he's basically like a, sorry, there's some guy spraying for bugs outside the window. That's just kind of scared me. So yeah, I basically realized that this guy is sort of like a party clown or something, someone that they like paid to come in, and he just didn't give a fuck about this stuff. And that sort of launched, those were two formative points of my life where I just kind of realized religion is pretty much bullshit. Like from that point on, and I always gravitated towards, I don't know, comedy that skewered religion, even as young as like 11 or 12, like things like Monty Python and certain Mel Brooks movies, and like certain George Carlin sets were things that I was listening to. And anyway, so that's just a little background before I get into all of this. So fast forward to about 2006 or so.
Wow.
If that's okay to do.
No, go ahead.
I should say that in spite of not being religious, I did develop, like I was not a lifelong atheist. I did develop sort of a, kind of a very ill-defined belief in God, and I kind of had some like random beliefs that I had never really properly challenged. Like I believed in reincarnation and some other things, and I guess I believed those things, but over time I had started kind of, there was a seed of doubt that popped into my head, that I didn't really explore that much. And then again, like I said, fast forward to around maybe 2006, 2007, somewhere around that time. Right around, it was within the first few years of YouTube. I had just been getting super fucking tired of hearing all of these 9/11 conspiracy like claims, and friends of mine who were otherwise really intelligent people were sending me things like Loose Change. And I don't know if you're familiar with these, but these are documentaries. Loose Change was produced by Alex Jones. Although I'm not sure, I think they made it and then he distributed it. But anyway, that doesn't, it's total nonsense. And like, I watched this stuff and I was like, I had an innate feeling like these claims can't be true, but I didn't know exactly how to debunk them at first. And I thought to myself, okay, I need to get on the internet and I need to dispute these claims because my friends are being stupid, and I encounter this shit, and I need to kind of have some arguments in order to discuss this stuff. So I came across a show on YouTube, which you're probably familiar with, the Atheist Experience.
No, I haven't heard of that actually.
Oh, well, you should check it out. It's been around for a long time. It broadcasts from Austin, and
is that Matt Dillahunty's show?
Yes,
oh,
yes,
okay.
it is.
So I have heard of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's quite as interesting as it was when it first started, but it still holds up. Like they do good stuff there, and anyhow. They did a special episode that was dedicated to 9/11 conspiracies. And I watched it and I was like, wow, this is great. I'm getting all this excellent information from it. And then I kind of binge watched it for a few days, probably like 3 or 4 days. And I thought to myself, like, okay, I came here, trying to debunk 9/11 conspiracies. And I didn't realize I was going to become an atheist by the end of that. That's basically what happened, because the rest of their episodes are mostly devoted to atheist claims and stuff like that. And by and large, they're talking about Christian claims, but they also cover all these other sorts of, and basically by the end of watching this, I realized, yeah, I don't really have a solid argument that really makes sense to justify my belief in a God. And just all these things clicked immediately. My attitude towards just discerning information really changed very quickly, because they were throwing all of these critical thinking, ways to approach critical thinking that I had never really encountered before. And it was eye-opening. It was really great. In a way, it did kind of suck, because I was like, okay, well, I guess when I die, that's it. But ultimately, I was glad to kind of, I'm the kind of person who, in spite of, if truth is unpleasant, I still want to know it, and I don't want to be in the dark. So that was my first glance at what was sort of the beginning seeds of the atheist movement. Okay, mm-hmm. I started watching the Atheist Experience, even more, and all these new people started popping up. Around 2007, 2008, maybe earlier than that. You had people like T.J. Kirk, who was sort of an asshole, but still making great points. When I say asshole, I mean I think he'd call himself an asshole. Like he's proudly an asshole. You had people like Dick Coughlin. Thunderfoot started coming into the fray, and then more importantly than those guys, there were the Four Horsemen. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. Dan Dennett, Harris, Hitchens, and who's the last one?
Dawkins.
And Dawkins, yes, of course. And those conversations were fantastic, and there was this burgeoning community of people who were discussing these things. I thought it was awesome because, first of all, it was at the tail end of the George Bush administration, which a lot of Jesus had seeped into the White House at that point, and then you also had court cases where people were trying to teach intelligent design in schools. So there was that, and then there was also the fact that this community kind of allowed a lot of people who were. I mean, I was in New York, so it's not like I felt alone, but there are a lot of people in different corners of the earth and all over America who are in small towns, and they feel very alienated because they might be one of very few people who hold these thoughts. So I thought that this community was doing a great deal of good, and then it wasn't just atheism per se. It was just kind of rational skepticism. And when I say that, I'm talking about things in kind of like the I don't know if you're familiar with the actual Skeptic Society, but it's basically a group of people who they endorse looking at claims critically and kind of applying the scientific method as much as possible to said claims. And there's people like James Randi, who I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's like a hero of mine. He used to be a magician. He's in his late 80s now, but he's just a legend. And he would debunk things like homeopathy and ghosts. And so you had this environment of people who I think were doing a great deal of good. They were teaching people critical thinking skills. They were giving people like a resource, like a place to go to if they felt kind of alienated by their like little religious towns. And overall, like, it was a pretty supportive community. And then somewhere around 2012, there was this huge discord that occurred, and that was coincidentally right around the time that I and Cece and I threw our hats in the ring and started making videos. I'd say that there was maybe like a 6 to 8 month period, like a calm before the storm, where like still like everybody was primarily just talking about atheistic issues, and it's really funny. Like this is sort of an aside, but recently I looked at the the comments of the first bunch of CC videos. And it's like now you look at fucking any video. It doesn't even matter if it's like a video for like a Barbie cartoon, but you're gonna see all of these like toxic, horrible comments that are just like filled with just angst and sometimes racist bullshit and stuff.
Yeah.
You look back and it's just like everybody's like, hey, keep it up. It almost feels like the 1950s compared to now. Every now and then you'd get a total asshole. But anyhow, so around 2012, there was this big kind of schism that occurred within the community. And it was driven by a few things. It was driven by, I don't know if you've heard of Atheism Plus. and and also this event called Elevator Gate. But it forced a conversation about feminism. And at the time, I think I could see some logic in both sides. I think like some of the people on the atheism plus side were a little out of line, because what they were essentially doing is they were kind of like attacking a lot of things that I believe in, but they were tacking those things onto atheism. They were kind of saying like, hey, atheism shouldn't just be about atheism itself. It should be about all these other things like feminism, like social justice, and again, I'm not necessarily opposed to those things, but you shouldn't treat people like assholes who are atheists if they don't outwardly embrace those things, I think, and they don't want to attach the atheism label to those things. But in spite of the fact that there was some decent criticism of these people, there was also this undercurrent of misogyny, and I'm not saying that all of the people by any means who were criticizing this thing were misogynistic, but that was always there. And so basically, where am I now? Basically, like, feminism slowly started kind of seeping into the conversation, and I kind of learned a couple of things that I hadn't before. Like at first I thought, because the thing is like, okay, I don't consider myself a feminist. Like, I wouldn't label myself a feminist, but I'm sort of like, I don't know if you've ever heard David Pakman.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I don't know if you've ever heard him specifically be asked if he's a feminist. He usually, I'll say exactly, close to exactly what he says, which is that, like, these days, feminist and feminism, it's such a loaded word that it kind of depends on what you define it as to whether or not I would accept the label feminist. So I generally don't call myself one, but depending on the definition, I could. Anyhow, people started kind of talking about certain myths that not all, but certain feminists were pushing. Like, for instance, the wage gap. The wage gap isn't a complete and total myth, but there are people who say that, like, the total average is 77 cents on the dollar, and it's actually far less than that. And basically, there's a few other examples, but I'm just bringing this up because I thought, like, in spite of the fact that overall I kind of sympathize with feminists, and and kind of don't think that feminism is a horrible thing per se. It's a good thing to be introspective, and this could lead to something good. Maybe we'll have less kind of just BS about being perpetuated as a result of this. But fairly quickly, like, people really started bashing feminism in, I'd say, like, a really extreme way, in a way that I don't think it deserved. Like, for instance, like, I think one of the first times that I really realized, holy shit, this is getting toxic as hell, is and it was actually the first Sargon of Akkad video that I ever came across. He was screaming his ass off like a maniac at Lacey Green, saying that who's that shooter, that shooter from, I believe it was San Francisco.
I'm not sure.
Elliot Rodger.
Oh.
Yeah. So he was screaming at Lacey Green, saying that Elliot Rodger was basically went on his killing spree because of the quote fucking feminist system. And the guy was losing his goddamn mind in this clip. I mean, it was pretty embarrassing. It was unhinged and totally fucked. And I had if you would have told me then that guy was going to rise to prominence in the like atheism / skeptic community, I just would have been like, get the fuck out of here. So then Gamergate occurred, and I think this is exactly the time where a real Trojan horse, and I was not aware of it at the time, but a real Trojan horse of right-wing bullshit infiltrated the scene. Now, don't get me wrong, there were some people who were invested in Gamergate, who were more on the Gamergate side, who genuinely did care about like ethics in gaming journalism. That's something that I would never really care to champion, but they cared about it. But then you had Milo Yiannopoulos, who came in, and he really seized an opportunity. A lot of people don't, and that was his first kind of like foray into the skeptic. I mean, this is around the time that the skeptic community, in my opinion, started circling the toilet, you know. And so Milo basically. Oh, and by the way, I think that this is such a funny thing to note. Literally weeks before Milo took up the cause of Gamergate, he had written an article on Elliot Rodger blaming video games for and he had made written several, like, because he was I think like not the gaming, but he was like the I don't know, his position at Breitbart News had something to do with like video game culture or like like electronics and shit. So he had written several articles where he was basically talking about gamers like they were fat inbred losers. And just weeks later, I think it just shows what a hypocrite the man is, and how his positions can just kind of flip on a dime. He suddenly became one of the most outspoken people in the Gamergate community, and there was a very clear reason for this. Okay, you got to remember, this is Breitbart that we're talking about. At the time, Steve Bannon was his boss. And these people realized, you know what, if we swoop in here and we start kind of, like really using something like video games, which is something that like a lot of youth culture is really invested in, we can really use this to further our culture wars. That's a term that I don't really use, but that they use. It's like, I think you probably know what I mean when I say culture wars, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So anyhow, so that just kind of even more kind of kicked the anti-left, anti-feminist machine into full gear. Right. And again, like, I think that there were some people who were talking about this thoughtfully, but just in general, like it just started, like the arguments started getting really weak. A lot of people were strawmanning feminists left and right, and I kind of started looking at it and thinking like, I don't like what's going on here. CC did make a couple of videos early on where he was not, I'd say, bashing feminists, but like making fun of, I don't know if you've ever seen feminist slam poetry and stuff. And in retrospect, like, even though that I think that those were fair game videos to make. I sort of regret, or I sort of regret making them because I don't think that there was anything wrong with them per se, but I just hate kind of contributing to that,
Yeah.
So yeah, you get me. So then, I hope I'm not being too long-winded here. Okay, I'm building to something. So then, around 2015, there was a string of incidents which included things like exchanges between Sam Harris and Ben Affleck, and like this guy Reza Aslan, who admittedly has kind of been a putz in some ways in the past. They just kind of had these conversations that sparked more conversations on the internet about quote unquote regressives, and regressives are well, originally regressives were a way to describe atheists, or really just people in general who are so politically correct that they are reluctant to discuss mostly Islam in a very head on, to tackle the more unpleasant aspects of Islam. And like before, when this first happened, I thought, okay, this can be a good thing because this can allow. And by the way, I should also mention that it was very geared towards the left, because the right has never really had a problem with bashing Islam. But very quickly, these arguments turned, and it was practically overnight in my mind, that that there was very little meaningful discussion of Islam. Almost overnight, regressive went from meaning that you're not willing to challenge Islam to you're not willing to admit that Islam is a cancerous, nonstop killing machine that will inevitably turn innocent people into suicide bombers. And if you want to discuss relevant tangential issues that have contributed to fundamentalist Islam becoming what it is today, then you're part of the problem. You're a regressive cock, So yeah, I'm bringing that up because yet again that was more kind of just poison that got thrown into the pot, and over the course of this time, YouTube and America was just getting increasingly hostile towards the left wing, and the term regressive, it very quickly just became a synonym for being left wing in many circles. Not everyone who used the term but there were so many people who just it was almost like all you had to do was push an old lady out of the pathway of an oncoming bus and you'd be called a regressive. It's just it was a way to describe just just nice cucks. That's a word that they would use. I think it's kind of a silly word. So then after that, I think that SJWs suddenly and SJW is kind of a term that I only use in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way. I like that they became fashionable to bash. And once again, I thought okay, there's some utility in doing this because for instance, a black student who was harassing some poor white kid with dreads for cultural appropriation, that's kind of silly. I although I sympathize with a lot of the goals that BLM has when a few of them ousted Bernie off the stage, and that was really all. I mean, this is something that someone like Kyle Kalinske often discusses, and I was watching your interview with TJ Kirk yesterday, and he was talking about how Kyle Kalinske talks about those things in like a meaningful way.
Right.
Okay, so there is some need to talk about these things, but there was just this overindulgence in it, and you had all of these people taking like poor trans kids who were like 15 years old making videos in their bedrooms and just strawmanning their arguments, making them look like fucking idiots. And it took on an era of unpleasantness that just really started turning my stomach, to be honest. And finally, okay, all of this bleeds into the 2016 elections.
Right.
Your Steve Bannons and your Milo Yiannopoulos just love this shit because, like there's an excellent BuzzFeed article about this. I don't know, and for those like. BuzzFeed is like
almost sounds like an oxymoron. That's why it's funny.
Well, see, the thing is that a lot of people don't realize this is that their ridiculous, like I think very lame feminism related videos. A lot of my friends who are feminists hate those videos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they refer to them as like Mick feminism. But what a lot of people don't realize is that at BuzzFeed there is a really decent journalistic group.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I've heard about that.
Yeah, that which is completely separate from those dorks that make those cheesy videos.
Right.
And I feel like I have to throw that out there because some people might be skeptical if I say like, oh, BuzzFeed article. But this BuzzFeed article talked about how and this was after the elections. It talked about how Milo was really conspiring with the alt-right to kind of sway opinions and stuff like this. And this is not all conjecture. This is based on all of these leaked emails that they have absolute proof for this,
Yes.
And he was in discussion ritually with maybe not ritually, that's not the right word to use, commonly with people like Richard Spencer and other kind of heads of the alt-right. Now, I don't think there are some people who will disagree with me. I don't think that someone like Milo is genuinely alt-right. I think he's someone who just has no moral compass and is willing to side with whatever slime he has to in order to further both his career, his own political goals.
I completely agree.
Yeah. And so suddenly I found myself in this community of people who had once really, I thought, embraced just kind of logic-based thinking, like really a good deal of them were pro-Trump. And if they weren't pro-Trump, a lot of them were not substantially arguing against him. They were often like defending him. They were really offering because there are no, rich, well-reasoned defenses of Trump. I mean, like the best defense of Trump is he's not Hillary,
Yes, that's true.
And don't get me wrong, like I am not a Hillary fan. I originated the hashtag I'm with her, but only because the alternative makes me want to shoot myself in the brains, balls, ass, and face. And so in spite of the fact that I was not a Hillary fan and I was Bernie all the way, it's just, to me, it's asinine to say that she was not clearly the superior choice. I mean, unless you're like, some sort of billionaire you make over $5 million a year and you're going to get like a super sweet tax break out of that, unless you're like one of those people, I think you're inevitably voting against your own interests. And what these people like Milo realized that they could do. Oh, and also I should mention that this community was also kind of, I think, chiefly responsible for Milo's ascent to fame. I mean, there are other reasons for it, but all of these people were making videos about him, and there was just this embrace of this like Catholic dude who like would talk so much bullshit, of this supposed not atheist, I mean skeptic community. And it was insane to me. And it was just crazy that like this community that called themselves skeptics were standing by by Trump, this total anti-science clown. He had burst onto the scene, onto the political scene, that is, by insisting that Obama was actually born in Kenya, which is one of the dumbest conspiracy theories of the past 10 years if you really analyze it, because it hinges on the idea that when he was born, in like the 1960s, they just knew that he was that he was the one, so they had to like plant these articles in
It's
like,
so dumb that I don't even personally think Trump really believes it. I think he's just saying it just for the fuck of it.
I thought that was the case for several years, but he has proven to be such a an astounding dumbass that I just don't fucking know. But it kind of doesn't matter. Either alternative there is equally awful.
Right.
Either dude,
I agree with you there.
Either the dude believes this nonsense that that only an idiot can believe, or if he was just exploiting the situation for his own good. It very, very well might be that situation. So and no, I mean, not, I won't say nobody there. You had your Thunderfoots, you had your Cult of Dusties, you had a Creationist cat who and maybe a small handful of other skeptics, if you want to call Creationist cat a skeptic, that were kind of really bashing Trump. But for the most part, things had swayed so far to the right that people, and some of these people, I think, genuinely were truly behind Trump, and then some of these people just didn't want to alienate their audience.
Right.
So they made these really poor defenses of this guy, and they would go so much harder on Hillary than Trump. I have no problem with going hard on Hillary for the things that she deserves to be held accountable for. But if you're doing that and you're not going just as hard or harder at someone like Trump, especially because he's just so fucking anti-science. I mean, that at the end of the day, that's like what skepticism is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about embracing science. And this is the guy who was saying that global warming was created by, was a conspiracy theory created by China.
Right.
And, and they also, another thing that they did, because they wanted to turn him into the antidote to SJWs. By this time, SJW bashing was so ubiquitous that they really had successfully and I'm sure fucking Steve Bannon and Yiannopoulos and the likes of Sargon were very proud of this, but they had really kind of done a great job of making the term SJW synonymous with just left winger.
Yeah, really.
And yeah, you agree?
Yeah.
Good. And a lot of people will probably say that I am being kind of a lunatic when I say this, but I really do believe this. I really do think that this stuff won Trump the elect. I mean, look, he won for a whole variety of factors, but you got to remember, he won with just 40,000 votes. Okay. And these people were chiefly responsible for making someone like Milo famous. They were a lot of them were the people who were kind of spreading like the Pepe meme and shit like that, and they helped build this perception of Trump as the cool guy. And it's so fucking funny that they made this snowflake who actually like wanted to like sue. I actually think he did try and sue Bill Maher.
Yeah.
For a joke where he called him a fucking orangutan.
Yeah.
You know, they tried to build this guy up as some sort of antidote to snowflake SJWs. And that's such a joke.
Yeah. So what I would argue personally that Trump lost is I would say that because he lefted Hillary on the issue of free trade, I think that was what won him the election, because he lost in the Rust Belt. And I feel like those votes there were the key, and I think that was the reason. But I wouldn't completely say that what you're saying isn't at least somewhat, attributed to his win.
Oh, yeah. I want to clarify. I am by no means saying that he won purely for that reason. There are all these factors that went into it. What the DNC did with Hillary was a huge part of it. Hillary just being kind of, in my opinion, not a very strong candidate in general. Her kind of another thing was, and I love Bernie, but I think that once people got a taste for Bernie, once they realized how awesome he was, like it's just like if he was not in the picture from the beginning, I think she would have seemed like a more palatable candidate. But Trump actually used a lot of his rhetoric in his campaigning.
Yeah, that's right.
And helped us. So I'm not saying that they single-handedly won the election for Trump, but I'm saying that they definitely, he did not win by a very large margin. And these people were tastemakers. When Sargon of Akkad back when he had a Twitter page, he would lose his Twitter like every other month or every 3 weeks. Every time he'd disappear from Twitter for just a few hours, he would be a trending topic. So these people are tastemakers. They are people like when he appears on the Joe Rogan show, that is one of the most popular episodes on Joe Rogan's podcast. It got over 1 million views within the first few days. So these people really underestimate. I think they like to purposely underestimate their, at least publicly, the impact that they have, so that they have plausible deniability. But these people, I realized by that point that wow, the skeptic community, at least on YouTube, has really fucking gone down the toilet. And it's unfortunate. The last thing I'll say about all of this is that I do think that it's more pervasive than just the YouTube community. I mean, you have other people who you have all sorts of things people embracing Jordan Peterson,
right.
and you have people like David Rubin, who supposedly at one time was a voice of skepticism. I never really thought he was, but a lot of people thought he was kind of.
Well, he was a left winger on TYT, so it's even further than just being a skeptic. It's actually being someone who claimed to be a liberal.
Yeah, and then there's probably better examples. You have people like, I don't know if you know who Peter Boghossian is, but he had done some very very respectable skeptical work, and then he started doing like he wrote the foreword for Stephen Molyneux's book. I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen
Yes.
Molyneux, but that guy is a fucking joke.
Yes.
And you know, there's so many things that I could point to. Michael Shermer. Michael Shermer is someone who, I don't know if you know who he is. He was actually, he's someone who's done some fantastic work regarding skepticism. He did some great work in terms of his debunking 9/11 conspiracies. He's one of the best people out there who he wrote the kind of co-wrote, I should say, the quintessential book that debunks Holocaust denialism. So he's done some really good shit, but even he like started kind of like his website like gave Milo Yiannopoulos' recent book like a great review.
Yikes.
And and he also called Stephen Molyneux one of the great skeptics of our time, which just it almost made me want to cry, because it's like I had such respect for Shermer's previous work, and I don't know, maybe he's going senile or something, but yeah, I hope that wasn't too like kind of verbose, but that is sort of kind of my take, my journey through the the skeptic / atheist community. And I'll say one last thing, which is, you know, those of us who did kind of speak up and bash Trump, and also we're kind of starting to voice just complaints about the way that people were overindulging in their bashing of SJWs and shit like that. We paid a price. You know, it was not a popular, at least in the community that we were in, it was not a popular opinion to voice. All of those people, myself, Dusty, I'm sure there's other people that I'm leaving out of it, Thunderfoot, they all lost a good deal of subscribers, a good deal of views, and it's fucking ridiculous because we were right. Trump's a joke.
Right. I completely agree, and I really appreciate the great story that's in so much detail. Do you have any last words before we end this off?
No, I just want to say that I hope everyone can check out Creationist Cat, because it's a bit different than what you hear. I'd appreciate it if you could, I've done a few videos recently that I'm really, that I really think represent the video, the channel well. But we did an interview recently with Alex Jones's ex-wife.
Yes,
and
Jones.
yeah, and it would be cool if you could leave a link to that down below, so that people can just have a good introduction to the channel.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciated talking about it. Thanks for for having me on.